Welcome to Artful Grief Care, an online support for people in grief before loss. I am Tracy K. Pratt, writer and artist, and fellow pilgrim in this unique season. It has an official name, Anticipatory Grief. Yes, there are two seasons of grief, before and after loss. Summer, fall, winter, and spring illustrate grief's place in life's rhythms. When our objects of affection are full of life, they live in a perpetual green like summer. Everything is as it should be. Grief before loss is like autumn on the mountain, when just a hint of death threatens our objects of affection. Green gradually turns brown. Bit by bit, life fades like one falling leaf after another until the very last one falls to the ground. Grief after loss is like the mountain buried in white. Summer is a memory. Spring slumbers, seeds burrowed beneath decaying leaves wait. A new summer will come for us. Once upon a time, there was no such thing as the rhythm of grief on our planet, the setting for a true, happily ever after story. It is the story of God with us. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and which was covered in darkness, and it had no form. The Spirit of God hovered over the waters. Then God spoke light over the earth. He spoke the universe strategically around it and spoke into its existence an environment on its surface. Everywhere his yet to be created prize creation would look, they would see his divine nature and eternal power. God surveyed his work at every step and said, "That's good." The stage was set. It was time to create his prize. He had in mind a two-part sculpture of his image, male and female. They were the centerpiece of the massive art installation and the subject of his true, happily ever after story. He scooped the earth up and he sculpted a man and breathed into him his eternal breath. He named him Adam. God took his rib and he shaped Eve. Adam named Eve, and God placed them in the Garden of Eden. He stood back and surveyed his image and said, "That's very good." Everything was as it should be, green like a perpetual summer. Adam and Eve lived happily together and with God, who visited them in the cool of the day. Perhaps they met under the canopy of two unique trees in the middle of the garden, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The one tree God forbade Adam to eat. "If you do," he said, "you shall surely die." Adam and Eve had no idea what die nor evil meant. But we do, don't we? Too well. We can thank Adam and Eve for that. Evil existed. Lucifer, once the bright and morning star of the angels, let his position get to his head and his heart, and he crowed, "I will be like God." He had followers. God kicked them out of heaven, not because he's mean and vindictive and insistent he get his own way. No, they no longer belonged. No one can usurp God's place. He is I am. One day Lucifer, now Satan, embodied himself in a serpent. He asked Eve a question. "Did God really say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" She mused. Well, he did say we should not touch or eat that tree in the middle of the garden, or we will surely die. He seeded doubt. Oh, you surely will not die, for God knows when you eat of that tree, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. She gazed at that luscious fruit on the magnificent tree. What would it be like to be wise like God, knowing good and evil? Why did she hear it from this creature? And Adam did not hear that from God. What good was God withholding? The seed took root, and she ate. Adam said nothing, nor did he refuse when she offered him some. Instantly, death invaded creation. Winter blew into their souls. Love for God shriveled and died. Pride was born, and shame covered them. Instead of running to him naked in the cool of the day, they hid in bushes and clothed in fig leaves. God did come that day. They cowered in their hiding place. He called, "Adam, Adam, where are you?" God knows our pain of grief. He lost his beloved image that day. With ruthless love, he cast them from Eden. They would now know the curse of evil. We know it too well when our object of affection suffers and death threatens. Before their exit, God made a promise of salvation and restoration to them and all their descendants, including you and me. He killed an innocent animal and clothed them with its skin. He set in motion continuous signs and wonders and prophecies about the promise until the appointed time in history. God the Father sent God the Son to be one of us. The prophet Isaiah described his earthly popularity centuries before as despised and rejected by men, the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Emmanuel, God with us, entered our life by conception, lived our infancy, childhood, and adolescence into adulthood, until at 33 he was murdered, innocent of any wrongdoing. Isaiah wrote the purpose for his coming. He was stricken, smitten of God, pierced for our transgression, crushed for our iniquities. God laid on him the iniquity of us all. Our rescuer's earthly name was Jesus of Nazareth, who referred to himself as the Son of Man. He lived our life in the shadow of death by choice. Jesus knows the pain of anticipatory grief. The night before his death, beads of blood dripped like sweat from his forehead. He implored his Father if there could be another way. Yet, not my will, but yours. He knew behind his Father's no to his life-saving request was an eternal yes. He said so himself the night he met with Nicodemus, the religious ruler. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes will not perish, but have everlasting life. God the Father's resounding yes was, is, and always will be the promise God made in the Garden of Eden. Jesus resurrected and now sits at the right hand of God the Father in heaven, with nail scars in his hands and feet and a spear scar in his side. In grief after loss, he is not aloof. When our objects of affection are dying, we are not ignored, though we may feel it. When we shake our fist at God, when we demand he save what or who we are losing, when we cry out, "God, help me," it hurts. Is there no other way? He whispers, I know. I am here. Trust me. Trust your object of affection to me. If I say no, I am saying a resounding yes to my eternal story being told in you and through you. C.S. Lewis expresses the gift of grief well. Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. We need not fear judgment or condemnation. We have his permission to grieve in his presence. One day things will be as they should be. In Revelation 21, the next to last chapter in the last book of the Bible, the written account of our true happily ever after, the future is described. Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things shall be passed away. This is not that day. God gave us grief for today to heal us from the inside out. It is the present path to the true happily ever after story. Its hope beats strongest in disappointment. The beauty blooms in our brokenness, and the happily ever after rings truest in grief. What deters us from recognizing his story when our objects of affection fade or die? Here are 3 ways and our Creator Savior's responses. The first one is doubt God exists or cares. He says, I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Cast all your cares on me, for I care for you. 2, distrust God has our best interest at heart. He says, trust me with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge me, and I will direct your path. 3, demand God give us what we want when we want it. He says, delight in me, and I will give you the desire of your heart. There is no created thing that can fill that God-shaped vacuum in our soul. C.S. Lewis describes this in his book, Mere Christianity. If I find in myself a desire which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world. God does not rescue us from the cause of grief, but invites us to meet him in the center of what things are, much like he met Eve and Adam in the cool of the day. We also need human companionship in anticipatory grief. Each of our grief journeys are unique, but this season is universal. We are fellow pilgrims. For 24 years, I partnered with our daughter in the fight for cystic fibrosis and lived what I now know was anticipatory grief. Without a miracle, it was evident when she was 12 years old, I would outlive her. After she died, my husband and I attended Grief Share, an organization that assists people in grief after loss. It was there we learned grief before loss is just as real and just as important. I offer you what I would have wanted when my Hannah was 12 years old: education, encouragement, and a safe place to engage with anticipatory grief. This is what I offer you as a fellow pilgrim on Artful Grief Care Facebook, Tuesdays from 1 to 2, so you may be refreshed and renewed for the week to come. Look me up on Artful Grief Care.